Hi, good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is now joined in and is ready to hear more about student financial aid at UCT. My name is Tasneem Salasa. I'm currently the Acting Director of the Student Undergraduate Funding Office. And I'm hoping everybody can see me, since I can only see nothing but the slideshow. So welcome. But before we get started, good luck with the upcoming exams. And we look forward to welcoming you at UCT next year. So with all of that said, let's get started. And just to note that some of you would have received an email from me today to remind you to apply for NSFAS. Some of you received an email a little while back also to tell you that the NSFAS applications are open. And I'll get into more detail about what that means. And so then hopefully that also comes into context for you, the emails you've been receiving from UCT. Okay. So what is financial assistance about at UCT? So first of all, the financial aid at UCT, if you look on our website, is all about NSFAS. We run a few financial aid programs, but the main financial assistance program is basically financial aid that is managed through NSFAS. And so in that way, we require all applicants that need financial assistance must apply via NSFAS. And so that relates to that emails you've been getting from UCT to remind you about applying. Okay, and NSFAS will evaluate the eligibility as per the Department of Higher Education and Training National Bursary Rules and Guidelines. So that's the policy document that sets the funding parameters and the criteria that applies to all students that receive NSFAS funding across the higher education sector. So eligibility for first-time university students is basically based on the following. So this eligibility, therefore, is eligibility also for UCT financial aid. It's for South African citizens. It's based on financial needs, so the gross family income must be less than 350,000 per annum. Not the net family income, the gross family income. And I think it's important to realize that distinction, because often people will say, yes, but after tax, etc., my family's total income is less than 350,000. The national rules and guidelines state a gross family income of 350,000 Rand. It must be your first undergraduate qualification. If you already hold a qualification from another institution, whether it be a 3-year diploma, you will not be eligible for funding from NSFAS. And so it's very important to make that distinction, that because sometimes people think, but NSFAS did not fund me, so now I can apply to be funded. They look at what you have done and whether you've already completed a qualification, and will decline you on that basis, irrespective of who financed that qualification. And I think it's important to understand that the aim of NSFAS funding provision in the higher education sector is to ensure that all financially needy students at least have an opportunity to get a first qualification. Not a second or a third, etc., but to get a first qualification, because this is driven by need and ensuring that the funding that's available touches as many people as it possibly can. And then, of course, you must be registered for a funded program. So that's not such a big issue at UCT, especially if you're coming in to do a first qualification, because we do basically your 3-year, 4-year qualifications, and obviously for medicine, it's a 6-year program. Where we have difficulty would be if you're coming to do an advanced diploma, but technically you should have a qualification already. So you see the prior qualification requirements of being a first undergrad qualification would therefore exclude you. So those are kind of the main points at which they will consider, and you need to actually go online and then complete that application. So the next funding program that actually is available at UCT is what we call gap funding. So this historically has been called the missing middle. Okay, these is people that do not qualify for NSFAS funding in terms of the criteria I've just mentioned, and have a family income of between 350,001 Rand and 600,000 per annum. So all applicants then apply to NSFAS up to the 600,000 per annum, and we then get that information from NSFAS, because they then do the validation on the application. They will do checks against SARS to check what the family's income is, And on that basis, we get that information and we then offer people gap funding. That gap funding is based on a sliding scale, so it runs from 350 to 430,000, 430 to 530, and like that up until the 600,000. And in that basis, we then offer a percentage tuition bursary and a loan based on the accommodation type. So if you're in res, the loan offer is higher. If you live at home, the loan offer is slightly lower because there's obviously a different cost differential. So again, I have to reiterate, everybody is required to therefore submit an application online to NSFAS at the NSFAS website. If you have not indicated that you need financial assistance when you applied to UCT, you would have gotten an initial email to tell you NSFAS applications are open. But if you had omitted that, you can go back to UCT's website, find the information for NSFAS to be able to apply, or go to nsfas.org.za, and there from the front screen, it will be very easy for you to actually go through to the application process. So as part of the NSFAS application process, you are required to register as a student. And I think some of the lessons that we've learned in the last few years is the little mistakes that people make. So you don't put your ID incorrectly. If you put your ID in incorrectly and capture it incorrectly, they validate that ID number against the Home Affairs. So then the application will be rejected. It is very difficult to go and try and reapply because that other application that you've done is sitting there, that's sitting as rejected. So it's important that when you do the application, you take your time, do it carefully, so that you get your information right. Another common mistake that we find is the person will put the parent in as the applicant, and then again put themselves in and later on in the application. Now, when we then have to try and say, is this a UCT applicant? We can't find you because there's the wrong person. Okay, it's not the applicant, which is yourself as a student, it's the parents' details, and we can't match that ID because everything works on matching your ID as a UCT student to your application as a NSFAS applicant. So very important that you read the instructions carefully when you do your NSFAS application and you follow all of the information that they require accurately. Another common mistake is the person will put in my mother, and in the next section they might see, oh, here's a guardian, and then they put their mother in as a mother and they put their mother in as a guardian. So you only have a guardian when you have no parents that is taking care of you. If your parents are there, you do not put in as a guardian, because what happens is it almost basically doubles the income. It says mommy's income and the mommy's again as a guardian. When they search to get income information to validate your application again, they'll say they'll double the income and now you're ineligible. Again, very difficult to kind of undo an application, remembering that this is applications that's done for the entire country. NSFAS will process well in excess of 500,000 applications, and so errors like that just kind of makes it difficult to try and resolve afterwards. So really important that that application is done accurately. I think the other important aspect is to do your application on time. So the closing date is the 30th of November, but you're going to need information. You're going to need to have a consent form signed. You need to have your ID. You need to have parents' salary slips and information to be able to upload it when you do the application. Now you come and you wait till the last day and then you realize, oops, I don't have all this information. If you miss the deadline, you miss the deadline. So I urge you, before you start writing your, start your final matriculation NSC exams, which is on the 5th of November, that you actually start doing the NSFAS application now. So that all you have to do after that is focus on actually doing your final NSC exams, rather than, oh, I must find the time to do a NSFAS application. So really important, people, if you can, start the process now. If you've already done so, well done. It's rather better to get in early than to get in later. The other financial assistance that we have at UCT is what we call a sibling rebate bursary. So this would be for people that are not eligible for NSFAS, they're not eligible for gap funding, okay? We will open those applications only in the year of actual study, and the application will be on the website. The criteria for that is that you need to earn between the 600 and the 750,000, and both siblings must be studying for an undergraduate program and have no funding. Okay, and then the one sibling will be assisted. But all of that information again is available on the website. And so please go and look at that if you feel that you fall within that criteria. So as I've reiterated, and I've given you some examples of some of the common errors in NSFAS applications, all applications must be done to NSFAS on the online application system, and you can find this at nsfas.org.za. Okay, they will also obviously outline the details on the documents you require in terms of that application is available on the website. But it is important that you start early because you'll have to download a consent form. You'd have to fill in that consent form. You must sign it. Your parents must sign it. You must scan it. You must put it back in. So I'm going to remind you again, try and do this as early as possible to avoid meeting that deadline and you don't have the required documents. If you need financial assistance, you do not want to miss this deadline. It is all important that you take this deadline really seriously. There is no guarantee that NSFAS will allow late applications because they have set a closing date already, and the basis will be on a first come, first served for funding. So they will not open applications if they've received enough applications to cover the funding that they have available. So please try and get your application in as soon as possible to ensure that you source the documentation that you need to be able to submit that application on time. Okay, so as I've outlined, the types of funding basically is financial aid, which we call also NSFAS funding. This is bursary funding. So all of the DA NSFAS funding is a bursary. It's not a loan. It is therefore not repayable. It will cover your approved cost of study, such as your tuition, your course fees, accommodation if you happen to be in arrears, because you're from out of town, that has a book allowance. And if you're staying at home and traveling into UCT, it also has a local travel allowance, which is then, and if you're in self-catering, which doesn't really happen to first-year students, we prefer first-year students to be in catering, there is a subsistence allowance too. Then our gap funding, which I said to you, is for those that are not NSFAS eligible, okay, but they have an income of less than 600,000 per annum, so 350 to 600,000 per annum. There's a bursary provided on the tuition or the course fees that is subject to where you fall in the gross income sliding scale of either 20%, 30%, or 40%. And then the second component to that is a loan offer. And right now that loan support is to a maximum of 46,700. This will not cover all the cost, so there will definitely have to be a co-payment towards the cost of study. Okay, so if you need more information and a little bit more detail on these funding rules and the funding models, it is available on the UCT website. So again, just remember, it's either financial aid, which is basically NSFAS funding, or UCT's missing middle program, which is gap funding. And then we have that sibling rebate bursary. Okay. Then the university also offers entrance scholarships. There is no application required except for sports scholarships. So sports scholarships, you do need to submit an application because there's very specific criteria for sports scholarships in terms of your sporting achievements, etc. But for a normal entrance scholarship, these are automatically considered by the faculty based on each of the faculty's very specific criteria. And this is based on how you've achieved in the National Senior Certificate results, and the faculty will inform you of whether you are eligible. So again, remember, no application. So these faculty-specific entrance scholarships are 20,000 Rand for the year. It is only applicable to the first year. Thereafter, you will be considered based again on the criteria that is applied for a faculty scholarship, which is then based on your second year or your first year's results. If you're in second year, based on your third year results. And so the scholarship is therefore not renewable. It's a 1 year offer of funding based on your achievements in the National Senior Certificate. The other scholarship we have is the Vice Chancellor Scholarship. This is a very prestigious scholarship. It is for 40,000 Rand. It's for the top achieving applicants in various categories. So when I talk about the top performing applicants in the various categories, it will be the top 10 NSC learners in terms of their results, say in the Western Cape. The top 10 NSC learners that apply to UCT nationally, it will be the winner of the Maths Olympiad. So that kind of top achieving applicants that have applied to UCT and received an academic offer, they will be offered the Vice Chancellor Scholarship. Again, no application. You will be informed if you meet the criteria as soon as the NSC results is available. If you want more information about these various scholarships, again, it's available on the UCT website. Okay, so people often want to know, when do I know if I qualify for funding? Now, NSFAS, because the applications are managed by them, will confirm funding eligibility. So when you apply to NSFAS, you go onto the My NSFAS platform, you register there, you submit your application. You need to keep that registering information safe. Your username and your password that you use to create the My NSFAS account, you need to keep that because you need to be able to go back and track your application. So it will say that they've received your application, and it will say they're evaluating your application. And so all the steps that will go, and then it'll tell you whether you're eligible or not based on the eligibility criteria for that application. And if you're eligible, it will then say we are waiting the registration information from your institution. So when you register, the institution will send your cost of study to NSFAS and basically put the claim in for your funding in that way. So it's important that when you create that My NSFAS account, that you keep your username and password safe so that you can go back and track your application and see what is happening with it. Okay, those that then don't meet the NSFAS eligibility criteria, we will then request information from NSFAS on those people that are not eligible and see whether they then meet our gap funding eligibility. And where those that then meet the gap funding eligibility, and I've outlined what the income criteria is for that, we will then inform you of whether you are eligible for that. Obviously, all of this is dependent on NSFAS releasing the final decision on applicants' eligibility. Now, normally they release that information once the NSC results are available. So we're expecting that they would probably release eligibility information on the 23rd or 24th of February when the NSC results is available. Okay. So we will, as I say, for an eligible student, once you've confirmed as eligible, you can then take up your academic offer and we will submit your study cost to NSFAS. So if you're in residence, then the residence cost will automatically come on system for us to send it to NSFAS. If you're staying at home, then we will send what is the home cost and the funding that is associated with that. If you are, though, ever from out of Cape Town, and you are not able to get a residence space at UCT, then you will need to fill in a board and lodge form, which we will have available for you. That will tell us you are now leasing, where you are renting, what the cost is, and there's a set value that we provide for that. It's not open-ended, so again, this policy that applies to that. And then we will assist students to be able to submit then the right cost of study to NSFAS. So it is really important that, you know, when you are asked if you've applied for residence, that are you going to, you know, take up your residence offer, please respond, because there's also priority given for NSFAS eligible students for residence admission. Okay. So what is the other criteria that applies to funding? So the duration of the funding is guaranteed within what they call the N+1 rule. Okay. So you got to complete your qualification within N, which is the minimum time of the program, plus 1 year. So if you're doing a 3-year BSc, then N is 3 plus 1 means you get a maximum of 4 years to complete it. You need to obviously pass at minimum 50% of registered courses, but I'm sure you can understand only passing 50% of courses in a year means you will not complete in N+1. So obviously there it's important again to look at the time frame and what you need to do to try and ensure that you're actually able to complete your studies within the time frame. That you must remain in good academic standing, so you mustn't be excluded from continuing academically, and that you continue with the same course or the funded program. Should you in your first year realize that this is not what you want to do, then you need to come and discuss that with us urgently, because again, all of it will still count towards your N+1 rule. You can't start another program in the next year and think, now I start my N+1 all over again. So it means that if you change your course of study after the first year, you have already used the +1, which means you need to complete whatever you then change your program to in the minimum time. So it's really important to understand those distinctions. Then other important facts to note, no double dipping, okay? So your financial assistance may be cancelled and reduced where you receive other funding. So obviously, because there's such a huge demand, we encourage people to apply for all other funding that's available, whether it is from foundations, from companies, any other kind of sponsorship will either cancel or reduce. So if you get full cost funding from a company, then obviously you don't need the financial assistance, and that funding can go back to NSFAS and be released to assist somebody else. So you cannot hold both. That's called double dipping. You can only get funding from one source. Again, the aim here is to give as many students the opportunity to achieve a qualification. Okay. You may not receive allowance payments from two sources or two funders. So again, very important that you tell us, I have a funder, and that we then stop any further payments where we might have paid you a book allowance and your funder has given you a book allowance. You need to pay the book allowance that was issued to you back to your fee account. Okay, you can't have two sources of funding, because ultimately when that comes out, you are going to owe on your fee account. And you will not be able to register the next year, because in essence you have taken money that you should not have taken, and in essence knowingly. So it's really important that you understand this, because we also reserve the right to take disciplinary action where that has happened. So that's important. And then in notions of clubs and societies, so obviously UCT has got lots of clubs and societies, whether it be sporting clubs or other clubs like the investment societies, all kinds of very interesting clubs and societies that students can join, so that you also have a holistic experience in terms of your studies at UCT. But you need to choose wisely. Often students just, in their first year join 110, and all of them have a cost associated, and that cost is charged to your fee account. Your funding does not cover those clubs and societies. So think of what you want to do carefully, so that you choose what you're really interested in and not get caught up in the hype of what to join, and that which you will participate in, because there is a charge for it, okay? And so that it doesn't become excessive. The other thing that you will need if you are a funded student and you receive financial assistance is that you need to have a bank account, okay? We do not deal with issuing students in cash, or issuing students kind of with vouchers, or issuing students with a voucher on a card type system. Any allowances that you must get, whether it be for books or for your meals if you're in self-catering, or for your travel if you're staying at home, will be paid to your bank account. So it's important that you capture your bank account at registration in students' self-service in platform, and they will tell you all about that when you come and register during orientation, because all allowance payments is direct to a bank account. So just so that you know where to locate us, when you do come and join us at UCT, the Student Financial Aid Office is in level 3, which is in the Kramer Law Building in Middle Campus. So if you've gone and looked at how the campus is set up, you'll have your upper campus where all the main academic activities happen. You have a middle campus, and you'll find the admissions office there, the financial aid office, the fees office, the law faculty is also in that building. And then below that is obviously lower campus, and on lower campus you will find your music and performing arts area, and obviously the other administrative buildings of UCT. So that's the telephone number if you wish to reach us. That's the email address, financialaid@uct.ac.za. Should you wish to email us to find out any particular points of clarity. And then the website address is below. It's a bit long, but if you go onto the UCT website and you just type in the search financial aid, then it will pop up at you. So you don't need to go and memorize that whole website. It's as easy as going onto the main website, putting in financial aid, and you will then be able to find the financial aid website with all of the information that I've outlined for you today. So that is kind of the end of my slideshow, and if we'll see whether there's any questions from anybody that will assist you with what you're needing to know. So I'm just going to check if there's anything in the chat. Okay, so here's a really important question from Lungili. He's asking if you have not received any financial aid. Is it possible to register at UCT and then, you know, try and find financial assistance afterwards? Yes, it is. UCT does not charge you a registration fee that says you must pay this before you can register. You can. Obviously, you're taking a big risk. The ideal is that you do know that you have a way of financing your studies. And I think it's more so important if you are a NSFAS eligible student and you did not apply. That really does put you in a very, very difficult position, because most companies that offer bursaries and support, if you check now, there's also on the financial aid site, there will be a bursary handbook, so you can check that. In that handbook, you will see that applications for funding for next year close this year, the same as NSFAS. So it's important that you actually do this ahead of time rather than kind of wait for the last minute and then say, okay, but now how am I going to finance my studies? So I'm hoping that the information I've provided you will guide you so that you can know to make those applications early and on time. So it says, somebody said that I applied, but my guardian, it says that was rejected because it says the guardian earns more than 350,000 per annum. So they rejected the application, but it's not true. So how do I get hold of NSFAS to correct the error? So NSFAS normally does open an appeal cycle. So once they release all of the information around eligibility for funding, those that they say are not eligible for funding, they can then go online and submit an appeal and the information to prove what they say. So again, it's really important here, remembering that NSFAS is looking at a whole lot of third-party data to be able to make the decision. So you can't just submit a letter and says, I appeal your decision, it is not correct, and leave it at that. You need to provide proof that substantiates why you're saying. So maybe, for instance, the information they have is old. Your parent became unemployed, lost their job, was retrenched. Then you need to provide that proof in order for them then to be able to look at those applications. But please know that they do have an appeals process. And so again, that's the importance of monitoring your NSFAS account. I'm not sure that I'm seeing any other applications, any other questions. So then Nobby, our moderator, has assisted in answering some of the questions, but just so that everybody else also has the benefit of the questions that's asked. Somebody says, I've taken 2 gap years, but my family still falls under the income bracket. Will I be eligible for NSFAS? Now, I'm not sure if it's gap year in study, so you were studying and then you've taken 2 gap years, or you wrote your NSC and then took 2 gap years and now only proceeding to university. So if you took 2 gap years after writing your your NSC exam, that's fine. You can still apply for NSFAS. That income cutoff and eligibility still applies. But if you were registered at a university before 2018, and then took time out for whatever reason, so maybe you fell ill and you need to recover, or something happened with a family member and you needed to be home, whatever the reason is, there's a different eligibility criteria that applies to students that was in the system before 2018. For that, the income requirement is, the gross family income requirement is that you must earn less than 122,000. So that's kind of an old system, and they're expecting that they'd be dealing more with kind of students starting higher education for the first time now, and not students that was in prior to that. Okay. Okay, so there's a question about the law. So doing a BCom and then doing the LLB. As of next year, NSFAS will only fund the first component, which might be a BCom, and it could be a BCom with a law major, but they will not fund the law program after the BCom. Okay, if you wish to do law, then they're going to expect that you start going straight and applying for the law program directly, the undergraduate law. Okay, the Bachelor of Laws straight, and not do a second qualification in essence, which is then the law PO1 as we call it on the system. But yeah, so they will not fund you to do the law program after you've already done an undergrad degree. Okay. So would gap funding apply to those who are doing their second degree? No, we still apply all of the same national funding rules to all of our financial assistants at UCT. It's for a first qualification. Okay. So anybody intending to do a second degree, or what we call a second qualification, will need to source outside funding, will need to approach companies, sponsors, foundations, etc. Again, it's part of trying to assist with socioeconomic transformation too, and ensuring that students that really need assistance achieve a first qualification and can go out then and work and, you know, contribute to the economy, to their families, to the country. So no, we would not fund for a second degree. Okay, so somebody says our parents earn more than NSFAS allows, but they are unable to pay. So I hope I've answered your question in terms of NSFAS, gap funding, and our sibling rebate, and that you can see whether you fall into any of those. If you do not fall into any of the funding programs I've outlined, unfortunately, we will not be able to assist you. And the next question is, if you achieve high academic results, will UCT give you any fee discounts at all based on academic achievement? No, we do not have a fee discounting program. We do have an entrance scholarship program, which I've also outlined, but not a fee discount program based on academic achievement. Okay, so that was the same question there. So it looks like we've covered the questions that have been asked, and I thank you for your time and hope that the information provided will assist you. And please remember, do the application on time. There's still 2-3 weeks before you start the NSC exam on the 5th of November. I encourage you to apply now, so that you just devote your time to your studies after that, knowing that your application is in and it is complete with all the information that is required. So all of the best with your final exams, and we look forward to welcoming many of you at UCT next year. All the best. Good night.